How's it going, everybody? This is Mike with Baltispore. Today we're going to be going over how we make our mushroom fruiting blocks. We're going to be going over what we use to make them. We're going to also be going over what the difference between hardwood oak, soy hulls are, and why they both are important when fruiting mushrooms. Don't forget to subscribe, save, and like this video. That's how you can help support us the best, is by subscribing down at the link below. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, what we've got here is we've got our automatic bagger system, and we've got it loaded up with hardwood oak and soy hulls. These are organic oak and soy hull pellets that are going to be used to make our fruiting blocks. This is what the mushrooms will grow on and use to eat and then fruit off of. This bagger system uses water and an auger, and it weighs it using the scale here. We load our bags up over the hopper like this, and then we tap the scale. It'll drop the pellets in there and then add water, making the moisture exactly 60%. So between 50 and 60% is a good moisture. The wetter it is, the more likely it can contaminate, but also if your conditions are sterile, then you're gonna have a longer flush and the mushrooms won't dry out. Once these are bagged, we take them off the scale and we set them down here. We let them sit for around 5 minutes so that they hydrate. This is what happens after you make your soy hulls and soak them with water. They'll absorb all the water and you'll have a substrate at what's called field capacity. Field capacity is where you can squeeze it and get about 1 or 2 drops out of it. So I got a few drops out of this, so this is good. That's called field capacity. Before we started using the bagger, you would have to just add pellets to a bucket, add a little bit of water at a time, and keep testing it until it was at field capacity. With this, it automatically measures the amount of water that goes into it. All right, welcome back. We're up in the incubation room. This is where our blocks colonize after we've steamed them. What we showed you was how we bag our substrate, and you're left with this right here, which is your soy hulls and your oak, and it's got the moisture content needed to grow the mushroom, or the myceliums, which then will fruit the mushrooms. After about 2 weeks, you end up with a colonized block like this. You can see where it's starting to still finish colonizing. This gets inoculated with grain that has mycelium on it, which then takes over what it's going to eat, which is this soy hull and hardwood oaks. This will then be used to fruit your mushrooms. All right, fam, we're over here where our blocks colonize at. Colonization is the process after we've made our blocks and inoculated it with mycelium. That happens at around 70 to 74 degrees, and that allows the mycelium to grow. You fruit your mushrooms in a slightly colder temperature. That'll trigger it, along with spraying it with water and adding fresh air. What I'm going to be going over are the differences between the mycelium, how they can look different between different mushrooms. Down here, we have blue oyster mushrooms. You can see the thick white mycelium starting to form. Oyster mushrooms are extremely aggressive as far as the mycelium goes. They just devour food. This block will be completely white in around probably another 2 days. It'll completely colonize. This block was done less than 10 days ago. What I'm going to show you next is lion's mane. Lion's mane mushrooms, the mycelium is a little bit wispier. This block actually is almost completely colonized, but it's a lot harder to tell because unlike the oyster mushroom, the mycelium actually looks a little wispy, and it's hard to tell that it's colonized. But as it continues to colonize, you'll see the lion's mane start to grow. Lion's mane is notorious for fruiting inside of the bag. It's a very fast fruiter, and it's a less aggressive mycelium. Another thing that's very common in the mushroom industry is contaminations. Contaminations are nothing to be afraid of. It's just part of it. No matter what you do, there's always going to be a little variable that can happen. You can lower the variable. We've got it down to where we have maybe 1 in 100 contaminated bags, sometimes even less. When you do get a contamination, which is common as a grower, it's nothing to be afraid of. It actually is just good compost for your garden. This is trichoderma. It's a very common bacteria that's in the air. You're always breathing it. When your bread turns green, that's trichoderma. That's one of the hardest ones that we deal with. Just every once in a while, the reason we'll end up with a contamination is a bad seal in the bag. It could be a bad filter patch from the factory. In hobbyist mycology, it's usually because of technique or just lack of the equipment. Whenever you're doing it in home, there's a lot of variables that can play. There's a lot more spores in the air. This is a contaminated bag. What we'll do with this is we'll turn it into compost. But I'm going to throw this aside. All right. What else can I talk about here? We have an example of a couple different things going on here. This is actually a block that was inoculated about 2 months ago with reishi culture. You can see that it is now fruiting reishi mushrooms. These will be used for our tinctures and or artwork if we want to make some little art out of these. This can also be used for tea. You can just boil it, make a little bit of tea. It's incredibly beneficial for helping with mood regulation, immunity. But this is one of my favorite mushrooms. You can see why. It's just so cool. And this will continue to grow for up to 3 months. A lot of people will add these to their greenhouse. They'll keep it in the bag. Your bag will fill with CO2. That's why this bag's all puffy, because it's creating CO2, which will then feed your plants. It's an amazing symbiotic relationship. Cool.